You know, I've always been the family disappointment. At least, that's what it felt like growing up. While my cousin Derek was getting straight A's and captain of the debate team, I was the one barely scraping by in community college, working 3 part-time jobs just to pay rent for my tiny studio apartment. Derek and I used to be close when we were kids. I'm talking summers at Grandma's house, building blanket forts, sharing secrets kind of close. But somewhere around middle school, things changed. His parents started pushing him into honors classes, while mine were just trying to keep the lights on. The family gatherings became these weird competitions, where Derek would talk about his latest achievements while I'd sit quietly, hoping nobody would ask about my plans for the future. By the time we were adults, the dynamic was set in stone. Derek had his MBA, his consulting firm, his perfect wife, his house in the suburbs. I had my determination and not much else to show for it yet. Family dinners became performances where he'd casually mention his latest business deal while I'd get the pitying looks and the "How's the job search going, sweetie?" questions. But last Thanksgiving changed everything, and I mean everything. The whole family was crammed into my aunt's living room. You know how it is. Mismatched chairs pulled in from the kitchen, kids running around, the TV way too loud, and that smell of turkey that's been cooking since dawn. I was helping my mom carry dishes from the kitchen when I heard Derek's voice coming from the corner where he was talking to my Uncle Jim and a couple of other relatives. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I swear. I was just walking by with a stack of plates when I heard my name. You know that feeling when you hear someone talking about you and your stomach just drops? That's exactly what happened. I don't know why everyone keeps asking her about her business ideas, Derek was saying, using air quotes like my dreams were some kind of joke. Come on, we all know the truth here. She's 32, still bouncing between random jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. Face it, she'll never amount to anything. My Uncle Jim laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Well, at least she tries. Give her that." "Trying isn't the same as succeeding," Derek replied. "Some people are just built for mediocrity. It's not her fault, really, but let's not pretend she's going to suddenly become some business mogul. She doesn't have what it takes." I stood there frozen, holding those plates so tight I thought they might shatter in my hands. The worst part wasn't even what Derek said. It was hearing other family members murmur in agreement, people I'd grown up with, people who'd watched me work my ass off just to survive, nodding along like my life was already written in stone. My face was burning with humiliation, but underneath that embarrassment, something else was building. Anger, yes, but more than that. It was like someone had lit a fire in my chest, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, absolutely certain about something. I quietly set those plates down on the nearest table, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection stared back. Tired eyes, cheap clothes, but something new was there too. Determination. Pure, burning determination. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd been putting off for months. I opened my business banking app and stared at the small savings account I'd been building. $3,000. Not much, but it was mine. Then I opened the Notes app and started writing down every business idea I'd ever had. Every dream I'd shelved because someone told me it wasn't realistic. Standing in that bathroom, listening to the muffled sounds of my family's laughter through the door, I made a promise to myself, not for revenge. Revenge is small and petty, but for something bigger. I was going to prove that the girl they'd written off was capable of more than any of them had ever imagined. When I walked out of that bathroom, I looked Derek right in the eye and smiled. He had no idea that his words had just changed the entire trajectory of both our lives. The drive home from that Thanksgiving dinner was the longest 45 minutes of my life. I kept replaying Derek's words over and over. She'll never amount to anything. Each repetition felt like a punch to the gut, but by the time I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot, something had shifted. That punch was starting to feel more like fuel. I climbed the 2 flights to my studio apartment. You know, the one with the leaky faucet and the radiator that sounds like it's dying. And I did something I'd never done before. I cleared off my tiny kitchen table, grabbed a notebook, and started planning my life like it actually mattered. See, I'd been playing small for so long that I'd forgotten I actually had skills. 3 years of graphic design classes, 5 years of freelance work that barely paid the bills, and a head full of ideas I'd never acted on because nobody had ever believed in them. But sitting there at 2 a.m., fueled by leftover turkey and pure spite, I started connecting dots I'd never connected before. The digital marketing space was exploding, but most small businesses in my area were still stuck in 2010. They had Facebook pages that hadn't been updated in months, websites that looked like they were built with Microsoft Paint, and zero understanding of how to reach customers online. I knew I could help them. I'd been helping friends with their side hustles for free for years. But this time would be different. This time, I wasn't doing it as a favor. This was going to be a real business. I spent the next week doing something Derek would probably call research if he knew about it, but what I called detective work. I started mapping out every small business in a 50-mile radius, checking their online presence, noting opportunities for improvement. And that's when I discovered something interesting about Derek's consulting firm. See, Derek liked to talk big at family gatherings, but public business records tell a different story. His company, Morrison Strategic Consulting, had been bleeding clients for the past year. I found complaints online about missed deadlines, overpriced services, and that special kind of arrogance that Derek had perfected over the years. Turns out, treating your clients like they're lucky to have you isn't great for business retention. The more I dug, the more I realized Derek's empire wasn't as solid as he pretended. Late payments to vendors, a shrinking team, and several negative reviews that painted a picture of a company coasting on past success while the owner got complacent. But I wasn't thinking about Derek's problems yet. I was too busy creating solutions for my own. I took my $3,000 in savings and invested in the basics: proper design software, a professional website, business cards that didn't look like I'd printed them at home. Every dollar hurt to spend, but every dollar was an investment in proving Derek wrong. My first client was Maria, who owned a bakery downtown. Her website was from 2015, and her Instagram had 12 followers, 11 of whom were family members. I redesigned her entire online presence for $800, which felt like a fortune at the time. Within 2 weeks of launching her new digital strategy, her online orders tripled. Word spread fast in our small business community. Suddenly, I had the pet groomer calling, then the auto repair shop, then the boutique that sold handmade jewelry. I was working 16-hour days, but for the first time in my adult life, I was working toward something that felt bigger than just surviving. 6 months after that Thanksgiving dinner, I had landed my first corporate client, a mid-sized manufacturer that paid me more in 1 month than I used to make in 6. I remember sitting in my car after that meeting, staring at the signed contract, and actually crying. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I was actually doing it. But the real breakthrough came 8 months later, when I was approached by a venture capital firm that had been watching my work. They offered to back my expansion into 3 neighboring cities, with enough funding to hire a real team and compete with the big consulting firms, including Derek's. That's when I started paying closer attention to Morrison Strategic Consulting's financial situation. And what I found made me realize that the cousin who'd written me off as a failure might just hand me the keys to his kingdom. Derek's company was in worse shape than I'd initially thought. 2 major clients had dropped them in the past quarter, and from what I could piece together through public filings and industry gossip, Morrison Strategic was hemorrhaging money faster than Derek's ego could handle admitting. The opportunity presented itself in March. My business partner, Jake, yes, I had a business partner now. Isn't that wild? Mentioned hearing through his network that a mid-sized consulting firm was quietly looking for an acquisition deal. When he described the company, my heart started racing. It sounded exactly like Derek's situation. I had Jake reach out through his contacts to confirm what I suspected. Sure enough, Derek was in talks with potential buyers, but he was being picky about who he'd sell to. He wanted to maintain some control, keep his title, preserve his reputation. Basically, he wanted to sell his failing company while still looking like the successful businessman he pretended to be at family gatherings. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I had Jake's lawyer contact Derek's lawyer with an acquisition offer, but here's the beautiful part. Derek had no idea it was coming from me. To him, it was just another interested buyer with the capital to bail him out of his mess. The negotiations took 2 months. Derek tried to play hardball at first, demanding a higher price and better terms, but his desperation was showing. His landlord was threatening eviction from his office space, his remaining employees were updating their LinkedIn profiles, and his wife was asking uncomfortable questions about their finances. The final offer was fair. More than fair, actually. I could have lowballed him considering his situation, but this wasn't about destroying Derek. It was about proving a point. The paperwork was signed on a Friday afternoon in May. Morrison Strategic Consulting officially became a subsidiary of my company, with Derek staying on as a senior advisor, basically a glorified employee reporting to someone he didn't even know was his little cousin. I kept the secret for 2 weeks, but I knew exactly when I wanted to reveal it. My aunt was hosting another family barbecue for Memorial Day weekend. The same aunt, the same backyard, probably the same mismatched chairs and too loud TV. It felt like perfect symmetry. Derek showed up looking stressed, but trying to hide it. He was telling anyone who'd listen about his strategic partnership and exciting new direction, spinning the acquisition like it had been his brilliant idea all along. Meanwhile, I was helping in the kitchen, just like last time, listening to him perform for the family. After dinner, when everyone was gathered around the patio with their drinks, I decided it was time. I stood up, and something about my energy made the conversations gradually fade to silence. "I have an announcement to make," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Some of you might remember that Derek recently partnered with a new company to expand Morrison Strategic Consulting. What you might not know is who that company belongs to." Derek looked confused, maybe slightly annoyed that I was interrupting his moment. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and opened the official acquisition documents. "Derek, I'd like you to meet your new boss. It's me. I bought your company." The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. You could literally hear the neighbor's dog barking 3 houses away. Derek's face went through about 5 different expressions in 10 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and then something that looked almost like respect. "That's impossible," he finally said, but his voice was barely a whisper. I handed him the paperwork. "Morrison Strategic Consulting is now a division of my company. You report to my operations manager, who reports to me. And Derek, I want you to know that despite everything, I plan to help you rebuild what you lost, because that's what family does." The family gathering turned into something completely different after that. People who'd ignored me for years suddenly wanted to know about my business. Relatives who'd treated me like the family charity case were asking for my advice. But the most important moment came later, when Derek pulled me aside. "I owe you an apology," he said. And for the first time since we were kids, he sounded genuine. "What I said at Thanksgiving, I was wrong. About everything." "You were," I agreed. "But you know what? You believing I'd never amount to anything might have been the best thing that ever happened to me, because it made me determined to prove you wrong." Looking back now, I realize this whole experience wasn't really about revenge or even about proving Derek wrong. It was about proving something to myself, that the voice in my head telling me I wasn't good enough was lying, that the family disappointment could become the family success story. I never needed their validation to be successful, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good to finally have it. Sometimes the best motivation comes from the people who doubt you the most. They show you exactly what you're capable of when you stop listening to their limitations and start believing in your own possibilities. Derek still works for me, by the way, and he's actually pretty good at his job, when he's not busy trying to prove he's better than everyone else. Funny how that works out.